Good morning, gardening friends. Today is Sunday, the 30th of July. It's about 8:30 in the morning. About 83 degrees out here. And I thought I'd take you on a walkabout to see what's been happening in the past week. Starting with my Nepenthes. It is really liking this spot. Here you can see what it wants to do. It wants to wrap its pictures around something to help anchor it in spot. I may just let it do that to anchor itself to that little window box somewhere. It has been hot. It has been very hot and dry. So most of last week was spent keeping stuff alive. I did a little bit of potting. Here my angel's trumpet is looking a little the worse for wear because of all the heat. But it still has a nice fragrance to it. Still have a few plumeria flowers left. Uh-oh, something's been eating the plumeria. I'm going to go ahead and put these toad lilies in the ground. I've figured out a spot to put them. The big thing, that's kind of what I've been doing, is it's getting tougher and tougher to keep things in pots in this heat alive. So I've decided to put in the ground as many things as possible. And the ones that are left, especially ones that like moisture, I've been putting saucers underneath and making sure that the saucers are full of water. Oh, excuse me, had to have a sip of my Gatorade. I am going to work a little bit on these bananas this week. Uh-oh. Oscar came. Come on, Mimi, you can go in. Come on, get in the house. Mimi doesn't like Oscar. And Oscar doesn't like Mimi, so she goes in the house he came to eat. They don't really fight, although they make a lot of noise. Well, let's put it this way, fur doesn't fly. Now, I was talking about the bananas, and they can be kind of thuggish in terms of they do like to spread. And when they spread, of course, they have these huge leaves that cover off the sunlight from whatever is underneath. They also soak up a lot of water. So hence you see a lot of potted plants here underneath. But I'm going to trim some of these leaves back this week. I did quite a lot of weeding too, here and there. My weeds tend to get a little on the long side before they bother me, which is good because then they're easier to pull out. That is the one nice thing about a lush tropical garden, is it's a little forgiving of weeds because there's just so much growth all over that the weeds have a hard time getting started. This little garden is looking nice early in the sun. Still no flowers, although I see a couple, or I see at least one pod where there will be a flower on the new angel's trumpet. That's where I planted one of the datura that I had that had seeded itself. I spent quite some time this past week cleaning up in here. This little seating area is now looking nice. The jasmine was really getting overgrown. Everything looks so lush in here. You really can get an appreciation for the snowball viburnum back there in the corner. Hopefully it'll bloom this year, but it has grown to the top of the fence, which is 8 foot tall. I wanted it to take over that back corner, and it has done that. Let's see, the view from this bench is also looking rather lush. Here you get a good view of the crepe myrtle. That was supposed to have been lavender when I bought it from Lowe's years ago, but it turned out to be the same color as the one I have in the front yard. Still pretty, but not what I was expecting. I cleaned out some of the bigger weeds. I'm going to have to come in and trim back the top of that fence next week. And here I cleaned out the weeds and also cut back a little on the spiderwort. I don't like to cut it too far down because the bees just absolutely love it. And every morning they're working over the spiderwort, so I just didn't want it over the monkey grass. And now you see my little bananas behind this little statue. I got those on sale at Lowe's about 4 or 5 years ago. And I expected them to get a little taller, but they're apparently a dwarf variety of banana. They never really get more than about 3 feet tall or 4 feet tall. And, which is okay, something different. They're not quite as prone to wilting, planting them there underneath the trees. But I imagine their roots probably go quite far and suck the moisture from everything else around them. I also opened up around this little fountain here. It makes a nice noise. My Ligularia is not wilting as much this year. It's set down roots. Ligularia is one of those plants that will let you know when it wants water because the leaves will absolutely flop flat back against the stem. My hydrangeas are starting to bloom a little on the white side with a blush of blue. Still have my butterfly gingers. Still have some daylilies in bloom. And my celosia have filled out nicely. I really don't know what's going on with this small sedum, but it doesn't seem to be doing real well. I thought it was birds, and it may be, or it may be when I water it that I have too much pressure on the hose, but I thought I might try fertilizing it and see if it snaps it back. It's obviously not dead, but it's also obviously not as lush as it once was. Of course, all the cuttings I took from it are doing really well, but the mother plant has faded a bit. Here you can see some of the older Nico Blue hydrangeas have already turned green. And there's Gatto's water bowl. He's been here using it because you can see there's dirt inside of it. I haven't seen him in the last couple of weeks now, but I'm sure he's back here somewhere. My air potato vine has really put out. You can see it's sending out long tendrils. I'll need to prune it back a little bit. So far it hasn't started putting out any potatoes. It will have potatoes eventually along its stem. Ooh, I have to put some more hummingbird food in there. Well, look at this. Adding insult to injury, my crepe myrtle, which I'm very assiduous, usually, at keeping these little sprouts from coming up at the bottom, has not only sprouted, but it has sprouted and bloomed. It actually looks pretty enough. I may just leave it there for now. Trim it back after the blooms are gone. My citrus tree is getting heavier and is leaning more and more over the sidewalk. Coleus are doing well. That's another plant that will let you know when it needs watering, because it'll absolutely wilt flat. And I don't know what this stuff is, but it is running rampant in my garden. Some kind of like a bindweed, maybe? I don't know. But you do have to keep it at bay because it'll twine to the top of a tree and then it'll put out flowers and seed heads, and those seed heads will spread that stuff everywhere. Oh, I noticed this week this particular female cycad has decided to put out a cone again this year. It put one out last year and I cut all the leaves off this spring because they were looking kind of ratty. It didn't put out any leaves last year. And now I noticed it put out the leaves and a cone. It's the only one to put out a cone this year. Still harvesting bits and pieces of my potager. Here you see the fairly pretty blossom of okra. Yeah, those okras need picking. I'm kind of sick of okra. However, if you pick it, you'll get more and more flowers, so I will go ahead and pick it. Here, oh, Lily of the Nile is also blooming nicely. It's got at least one more head to come. I don't see any heads in this one. It may come later. The blue and purple combination actually, I think, looks pretty nice next to one another. The bananas here have formed a beautiful looking clump. Something is eating my bananas. Here you see a gecko on the other side, or an anole on the other side. He's not doing the damage. It's some kind of a bug that likes to get inside the banana leaf when it's curled as it's growing. I think it's a horse lubber that's actually doing that, because I do find them around bananas. Oh, and the big news this week was my figs. My figs are absolutely to die for delicious. That's a ripe one there. And I think they're just about all gone. I didn't know that much about These are the black Italian figs, and I learned, because I harvested them at different times, if you break a green fig like this one off, it will bleed white sap, which kind of is bothersome because usually white sap is indicative of something that's toxic. So I Googled it and found out that the white sap is prevalent in the fruit of figs, and the riper they are, the less of that sap there is, until you get a really ripe fig which has none. So I've been harvesting at different stages, some that are just blushed black. They're not real flavorful, but they're sweet and taste very sugary with a slight citrusy taste. Black figs, however, like that, taste like your traditional fig, as in like Fig Newton. And I also had one that was overripe, that was sagging and very soft, and I tasted of it, and it tasted like fig, but it had started to ferment. So I've tried all different types of figs, and now that I figured out how to ripe, and also if you pick them unripe, you can just leave them on a counter for a couple of days and they will ripen. So I've learned all the tricks to eating figs with 1, 2, 3 figs left, so I'll be prepared for next year. I harvested 3 cucumbers off of this cucumber. I will do that again. Nothing seems to like to eat the cucumber plants, and the cucumbers are actually pretty good. Back in here, all is well, nothing died. There you can see the close-up of the column Rose of Sharon. It's gotten real floppy at the top, and so I've had to tie it back. It's supposed to grow in the shape of a column, which it does do, but it tends to get so top-heavy that they droop over. So I may come in here after it's done blooming and thin down some of the sprouts. Like this particular branch has a bunch of branches that come off of it, and I may prune that down to just 2, and that'll lighten the load and it may not bend quite as much. This little needle palm that was a seedling has established nicely. That will be the place where I keep it. It's been moved quite a lot before it got there. And I do want to take you out by the street today, because some of the more exciting news last week is there's a very good possibility that this construction may be wrapping up. There you see a particularly decent shot of the purple crepe myrtle that I have. Oh, and still the heads of the limelight hydrangea. But what they did do last week was they filled in the hole and started tamping down the gray gravel. It wreaked havoc with my paintings because the vibrations kind of jostled my things around that I have hanging on the wall. Not terribly, but a little. You can actually walk down in here now. And what I did last week was I cleaned up my sidewalk. Of course, they still have to work here. They put in this culvert, which will be the street. They still have to deal with this culvert here that's going to be partially under the sidewalk. But they finished just about everything else, so this will be the last of it. And I cleaned off the sidewalk last week, so my piece of sidewalk is looking better. It was about knee-high in weeds, so it's come a long way. At this point in time, I don't plan on doing anything to my fence. I was thinking of maybe planting something on the outside, and I think I may just leave it with dirt, or mulch, I should say. Oh, you can see the sun shining on the flowers of the magnolia, little gem magnolia. Still a lot more construction to happen going in that direction, but there's always another day. Fortunately, I've been pretty lucky. It's only been dug up like this since February. And I got a new sign saying no outlet. Although it lies, there is an outlet there. My cactus, believe it or not, I do have to water this cactus. You would think cactus would be used to being dry. And they are, but this one still requires me to water it, probably twice a week when I water the things in the ground. The nice thing about having an established garden, if you're not constantly fussing with it, planting new things, is they can set root and not wilt at every little heat wave that we get. So pretty much the things that I have to look out on a daily basis are anything that's potted. Keep an eye out, look for wilting, fill the bird bath. This little potted plant, the Loropetalum, I took a tip from an English gardening program. I think her first name is Bunny. I don't remember the last name. In any event, there's no bottom to that pot. I cut the bottom off of it, and so therefore the roots of that shrub can go down actually into the ground, but it looks like a potted plant. And therefore, once the roots hit the ground, it doesn't tend to wilt quite as much. Even my hydrangea this year really hasn't wilted once. So pretty much the things that are in the ground have established nicely. And I think I will leave you today with a view of the top of my Phoenix canariensis, my date palm. Definitely the top is coming back. I fertilized it all in the last couple of weeks, so it should be good for another 3 months. So that's about it for today. I will now go in and soothe Mimi's nerves. She'll be fine. Have a good day. Bye-bye.